Now that we have a restaurant type, let's create something that we can use for data access that will store and retrieve restaurant objects. Before we get into the complexities of working with a real database, though, I want to set up something very simple that will only work in test and development, but implemented in a way that will allow me to easily swap in a real data access class using a SQL database in the future. And to do this, I'm going to add another project to the solution, also a class library, and we're going to keep our data access classes separate from our entities and from the UI or the web application part. We will call this odefood.data. Inside of this, again, I'll delete class1.cs, and what I want to do is add a new item, and in this case, what I want to do is add an interface definition. So what we're going to do is start with some in-memory data that will only work during development, but we'll hide our data access behind, let's call it restaurant data. That will be the name of our abstraction. I'm going to make this a public interface, and we're going to start with a single operation. I want an operation that can return an IEnumerable of restaurant, and in order to be able to access restaurant, I'm going to need to add a reference to odefood.core. I'm going to use Control Period in Visual Studio and select Add Reference from the menu over here on the left. For those of you not using Visual Studio, I just want to show you what that will do. If I open up the odefood.data.cs proj file that represents this project, this file will keep track of all my NuGet package references as well as all my project references. So you can see that we have now referenced using a relative path the odefood.core CS proj file. That will give us access to the types defined inside of odefood.core from odefood.data. Later, we're also going to have to add references from odefood, the web application, to these other class libraries that we've been creating. But for right now, I'm going to close this, discard my changes, and continue programming my interface. So I want a method that will get all restaurants. And for right now, I'm going to implement that using a class that I will call in-memory restaurant data. This will implement iRestaurantData, and I will use Visual Studio to quickly add the methods for me. So Control Period and select Implement Interface. That will add the getAll method for me. And now, once again, I'm going to do something that is only really going to work inside of a development environment. It's just something I'm going to do to give us data to focus on building other parts of the application until we come back and start working with SQL Server. What I'm going to do is add some data just using an in-memory list. So let's give this class a constructor. Let me also provide some more room on the screen here. And let's say behind the scenes, we're going to have a list of restaurants, and that will be a variable named restaurants. And inside of the constructor, I can say restaurants is a new list of restaurant. And let's go ahead and populate our list with some data. So let's create a new restaurant. I'm going to make up identifiers here. So with an ID of 1, the name is Scott's Pizza. The location is Maryland, and the cuisine equals a cuisine type of Italian. And now I'm just going to take a moment to add a couple more restaurants. You can do this on your own and make up any data that you want. We'll come right back when I'm finished. Now that I have some sample restaurants in place, let me implement getAll using a simple link query. So I could say from R, which is a restaurant, in the restaurant collection that I have. Let's do some simple ordering. So I could say order by r.name. We'll have them in ascending order. And then we will select every restaurant. With that, I'm going to save my data access file, or one step closer to putting data on the screen. There's just a few more chores we have to take care of first.